I don't understand, I mean, is this list that you have, is that here of how you differed on your votes?
This was really
Because
more of
let me just say, I think it is so under the radar here about this race, and who you are, and who she is, and how you differ.
There are bills we voted the same on, and that she's in the House and I was in the Senate. But there were some noticeable differences. And some of these were bills I carried. And one of them was in regards to water efficiency. We go down to House Bill 1021, health insurance and maternity being covered by insurance companies, and also contraceptive coverage. I thought, covering somebody on maternity leave for women is a good bill, and my opponent voted against it. I mean, it's a distinct difference. Colorado Kids Outdoor Grants Program, a program where kids can go and learn outside and learn about the environment that we all cherish here. And it was, I think, if I remember, Suzanne, it was gift grants and donations. I don't know if there was any additional cost to that, and she voted against it. And I think that's a very important thing, for where we live and the education of our future generations. Pay equity.
And probably the gifts, grants, and donations typically are our Colorado match, but it's from nonprofits,
right.
And that gets us federal funds, because right now there's a lot of federal funds, believe it or not, for maintaining outdoors, doing special projects with students outdoors, and the healthy child syndrome. So why Ellen Roberts voted against it, I don't know.
I think it was partisan politics. That's what it was. And what we have seen a lot is I go out and Suzanne could say I differed with my caucus at times because of the way the makeup of Senate District 6. I mean, we have different interests out there. And I did have to work across party lines. I carried a bill on the FASTER legislation that went into place last year. And I got lots of calls from my constituents. FASTER was increase in vehicle registration fees as well as the late fee associated with that. But there was a late fee for trailers that was $25 a month over a 4-month period and $100. And I started getting calls from my constituents saying, what's going on here? I have a wood hauler that I use in the fall. It hasn't been licensed. And I went in to get my license plate, and on top of the increased fee, there's a $100 fee on top of that. And we use it twice a year. Or camp trailers, they get their one camping trip in August. And so I carried a bill. Actually,
I think I carried it, or
you
we carried it together.
The initial bill, and then I introduced an amendment to include all trailers.
That's right.
That passed the Senate, and then it failed in the House, and then it came
brought it back.
Right?
Because we knew it was right. We in the majority knew it was right to make sure that the trailers that are used once a year, and those small two-wheel trailers.
House Bill 1211 that you were the Senate sponsor on.
That's right. That those be exempted. And so Bruce really was the spokesperson for the rural areas and the small owners of these small trailers, to make sure that happened. And you did a great job of defending it on the floor.
And then we had to go with another bill, a complement bill, and it was actually had a Republican sponsor on it too, because we convinced both sides this was the right thing to do for our constituents. And so, that's but going back to the differences, payday lending was a huge issue this year in the Senate. And basically, I thought after talking, there were some compromises made with the industry to make sure that they could stay in business, or we believe they could stay in business. But there were some people being taken advantage of out there. And my opponent voted with the lenders, and I voted with what I believe were the people who needed to be protected. Pay Equity Commission, which was to look at pay equity in this state, and women's pay versus men's pay, and possibly minority, just to look at a commission. That's all it was. She voted against it, and I voted for it. So there are noticeable differences. One I will comment on was Senate Bill 191, which was an education bill, which was extremely sensitive, extremely difficult this year in the General Assembly. And that had to do with the restructuring of the system that we currently have for education. And obviously there needs to be some changes and adjustments made, but this was partly driven by the application for Race to the Top. And because of that, it had to move very quickly through the General Assembly. And there was split. There was a split on this in the Democratic Party. There were some splits in the Republican Party. The teachers' associations, when it came to this, were against it because they hadn't had a lot of input into it, and there were amendments introduced, but they weren't comfortable with it. We still didn't qualify for the Race to the Top funding, but I can tell you I actually voted against it because I didn't see a funding mechanism that would fund those changes that were out there, and that I had calls from I don't know how many teachers in my area saying, what are you guys doing? This is moving too fast. Ellen voted for it, but there are, after all that, even though I voted against it, the American Federation of Teachers were for the bill, and the school executives were for the bill. They all, CEA, AFT, and CASE, all support me because they realized that I cared a lot about the bill and that I understood the bill and recognized what the problems were with it. So even though folks differed a little bit, they have all come on in support of this race. They're supporting me. So I think that's a good sign, and sometimes you have to do what you think is right for your constituents. So any of the bills on here, I mean, there's some obvious differences, and I'd be happy to talk more about that.
No, it's just that I think it's good if people have some sense of the differences.
There was the water efficiency bill I talked about, and the other one, which was seemed like one of those common sense things as we look at water use in this state. There was one on here that just contractors. Let's see, which one is it here? It's the second one from the bottom, House Bill 1358. That the consumer, when you're building a new home, is offered a water efficiency option. That they come in as a contractor and say, you have the option of doing this. And that's all it was an option. And, you know, of course, the home builders thought it was one more thing on them, but it really wasn't a huge cost to anybody. It didn't say you're requiring water efficient structures, or fixtures. Just it's an option you can look at when you're building a house. And I thought it made perfect sense. People had talked to me about it. It was actually supported by the environmental community. And she voted against it, and I voted for it. It wasn't my bill, but it made perfect sense to me. And then on the back, there's scorecards. Actually, there's a typo on here, but Colorado conservation voters, I had a 92% rating from the folks in the environmental community this year. Her rating was 33%. National Federation of Independent Businesses, I think we both were very close, actually. I went with 100% because that's small business that we're talking about out there. And then the Colorado Farm Bureau, I was a Pinnacle Award recipient again. So there are the Western Colorado Congress, that's actually a typo, that's Western 3, which the Western Colorado Congress is a part of. I was 100% with issues on the Western slope. Bob was at 33%?
31.
34% maybe? 31% for my opponent. So, I mean, are we representing Western Colorado and rural Colorado, or are we representing maybe bigger business interests in Denver? And so, those are just a few of the things. And the endorsements, we've actually picked up more since then. And so things look very promising, but it's going to take a lot of hard work to bring this home in November, which we are committed to do. I think we're down to 38 days, Bob. I have people tracking it for me. But it really is getting down to the wire. And we have used a lot of our budget for signs, which please pick some up. People have asked about the signs, whether they're effective or not. I don't know whether they win votes, but I can tell you it's name recognition. And when people see that name out there and then they go to the ballot, they'll recognize, hopefully. And the best part is when you drive in somewhere like this, you see your signs. As a candidate, it makes you feel real at home. So thank you for those that have them out there. Other questions?
I think the signs are really